there's a lot of, I say there's a lot of depth to my life. I mean, like the depth of joy and beauty in that, I feel incredibly lucky that I made it through all that junk.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Unlucky by Blackpool Lights, featuring my guest, Billy Brimblecom on drums. A native of Kansas City, Billy plays with an emphatic crispness that made him a valued member of that city's influential power pop scene in the 90s. After relocating across the country and realizing many of his initial musical dreams, Billy was forced to re-examine his priorities when his leg was amputated due to cancer. Although he's still a working drummer, much of Billy's time is now spent as executive director of Steps of Faith Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping amputees access artificial limbs. The organization's annual benefit concert, Thundergong, is Saturday, November 9th at Uptown Theater in Kansas City. Performers include Jason Sudeikis, Wynonna Judd, Fred Armisen, Will Forte, The Get Up Kids, Sam Richardson, and more. Tickets are available at thundergong.org. I spoke to Billy in downtown Los Angeles. And now my conversation with Billy Brimblecom.
I had a moment recently. So my dad has 4 kids total and different mothers, different wives. And so I didn't grow up with any of them. Anyway, I was around for Father's Day, I was with 2 of them.
Older or younger?
Both younger. There's one that's older than me, and she lives far away, but everybody else lives in Kansas City. So I was with younger sister who's 11 years younger than me, and then younger brother so she's like, 30 something, and then he's like 22. And we're at this restaurant. This is a feel old moment. And it was like a crazy mix of music. And he was like, at one point he looks to her and points to, the speaker basically. It was like, crazy. Who's on the aux? Have you heard this terminology before?
On the aux?
See, right? And I looked at him and she was like, yeah, wild mix, right? And I looked at him and I looked at her and I said, this is a moment for me. Like, what do you mean? I was like, this is a feel old moment. You mean on the aux, meaning like who is on the auxiliary cable? Who is the DJ that made this mix? He was like, yeah, exactly. You never heard that term? On the aux. There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
On the aux.
Yeah. It's and I mentioned this to somebody I saw recently. I was at lunch. This came up. I was at lunch with a friend, and like his daughter was there, and she's 15. It's the same kind of thing. She's like, "Yeah, you never heard that?" Yeah.
Wait. So, did you grow up with your mom mostly then, or were your parents both around when you were growing up?
They were both around. My parents were divorced when I was. I say that my family tree is like a weird bonsai plant, So my parents got married really young and then had me shortly thereafter. And they got.
And your dad had a daughter from before.
Yeah. So my dad. Yes, that was another thing. My dad and his girlfriend in high school got pregnant, and then had the baby, gave the baby up for adoption, then got married for like 6 months. Crazy. Fast forward many years later when I was probably 14 and she found her biological parents. And so now she's
So she was 18 or whatever at the time,
yes,
21.
Right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So it's great that's my sister Becky. She's beautiful and awesome. And we used to see her on tour all the time. We would stay with her in Columbia, South Carolina.
I've met your dad at your event, and it seems like you guys are pretty close now.
Yeah, I would say that my dad and I have a better relationship now than we've maybe ever had, which is great.
What kind of music was on in the house when you were growing up?
There was a lot of music. So when I was with my dad was a big kind of fountain of musical influence for me because he was just really into music. So he had like a big record collection, and he had, he would make these cassette tapes where he would just record the radio, these mix tapes from the radio, and he would call it Electric Lunch, which is I think maybe what they called the lunchtime radio show on KY 102 in Kansas City in the 80s or whatever. Yeah, so just like classic rock, I was a radio kid from really early on, like listening to whatever the pop radio was, and classic rock radio I now know was kind of new then. But then also like I had an uncle, my mom's brother, who was a musician, who was like a singer and a guitar player, and he would like play shows and stuff, So I remember being a kid and seeing him like, singing Willie Nelson songs, and that was awesome. And my grandma sang, and they were into like legit old school country, and so yeah, it was kind of
Did you sing?
No, and still don't. I wish I could, but yeah, no. But my grandma sang, and my uncle was really good, and my dad, when he was a kid, played drums a little, and like played like upright bass in the orchestra a little bit. He's one of those guys that was like good at everything and did everything for a minute, like good athlete, good musician, charming guy, that kind of
Hence
thing.
the 4 different women, or the
maybe so. Yeah. Good at luring them in.
good at relationships for a little bit, and then
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Was your mom a music fan?
She was. I remember my mom, like when I was a kid, I have memories of her singing to me when I was little. Like if I was upset or trying to go to sleep or whatever. I don't remember the circumstance, but it seems like it was something like that, right? Kind of a soothing thing. And then I also remember her, like when she would be taking a bath. I remember hearing her in the other room when I was little singing, which is a good memory. So, she was a music fan. My first show ever that I remember going to, first concert ever, was with my mom and her sister, my aunt. I don't know how old I was, but I know that I was under 7, and it was Ronnie Millsap at Worlds of Fun, which is like a roller coaster theme park that's still there in Kansas City. But then fairly shortly thereafter, my dad surprised me with tickets in 1984, Arrowhead Stadium, Kansas City, to see the Jacksons Victory Tour, which was...
Oh man, so right. Good.
Yeah. Opened there 3 nights. We only went 1 night.
I think that's when they put out the single, Can You Feel It? It
was after that, dude.
Tour?
So it was after that. So the Victory Tour. So there was no. This is crazy. Not just Michael Jackson, but just like music history. The biggest album of all time had no tour. There was no Thriller tour. So after Thriller, the Jackson brothers got together and made this Victory album, is what it was called.
I remember it.
And the single was a duet with, or collab with Mick Jagger called State of Shock. That was like a minor hit.
If a Michael Jackson song comes on, can you still enjoy it?
I was having this exact conversation with my buddy Jason last night. And it's a weird...
Jason Sudeikis?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a weird... we were talking about this very thing last night. Oh, I don't know. I think that's up to the listener.
No, I'm saying, can you personally?
Can I enjoy it? Yes.
I think I can too.
Mm-hmm.
When did music start to feel like something you could be a part of rather than just consume?
So, that would have been when I was, I would say 11, but it was actually 10 because, I was really into it from as early as I can remember, definitely consumed a lot of it, have vivid memories of like laying on my bed, listening to music on cassette, reading the lyrics, looking at the liner notes in the liner notes in the cassette, smelling how the new cassette smelled and how it felt when you opened it. And yeah, I that's great memories. But
It's a lot more vivid than the aux, bro.
much more vivid than playing something, rocking something from the aux.
Although that's just our old brains. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure people are going to remember how an auxiliary cable smells in another 20 years, right?
Dude, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I just remember how that Bluetooth felt.
Yeah, I can never forget, my terrible Wi-Fi signal when I was trying to play this Spotify jam. So yeah, when in fifth grade is when you could join elementary school band. So at that point, this is the late 80s for me, and I wanted to play the saxophone because this was a very prominent instrument in popular music at the time.
It's kind of the coolest instrument in band other than drums. But,
Exactly.
But it's like in popular culture, it's cooler. I mean...
right? Yeah. So
you had Careless Whisper on the airwaves. You had a lot of rock sax.
lot of rock sax. There was like Huey Lewis in the News. I remember hanging out at my friend's house and being like, "That is so awesome! That saxophone in that song. I want to play the saxophone." So I did that, but actually did not do that. So meaning they put me on the clarinet. What a way to get a kid excited about playing the saxophone than put him on not the saxophone. I understand now why that happens from a music education standpoint. You learn all of the reed instruments, and I guess maybe the clarinet is easier to learn than, I don't know, but...
Well, it requires a little bit less breath if your lungs were still relatively small as a kid.
Right, yeah.
I have a B-flat clarinet over there in my studio, Billy, and I'm going to ask you to play it later.
We'll see what muscle memory I have in that. But so I did that for a year, and I remember even the band did something in the talent show, that spring, and I played with my school bandmates, something on the clarinet that our band director had us do. But that summer is when I was like, I need to play the drums, and it's a really particular memory of being in the car, sitting in a parking lot, like coming or going from somewhere with my dad, and the song Wipeout came on. And, again, was really drawn to music, and we're playing, and we're like air instrumenting. That's what I mean. We're playing, just like jacking around, my dad and I, I'm 10 or 11. And he was like, motioning me to like air guitar or whatever, and then the drum solo comes on, and then I start banging on the dash. He's like, "Oh, you want to play the drums?" And it's funny because like in my head, how I remember it is like, "Yes, I do." And it was like, that was the moment. So really the first inspiration, as I'm sure it is for many drummers, that I can remember from the drums is the friggin' accented 16th note drum solo of Wipeout, So then from there, what I did is, technically I should have been in the fifth grade band as a sixth grader, band, first year of band playing the drums, but I just showed up with my friends to sixth grade band playing an instrument that I didn't know how to play because I had a snare drum.
Well, look, you don't make that much progress in fifth grade anyway.
Right? Yeah. So it worked out. We had a new band director, and he didn't say you have to go to beginning band, but I think very quickly in about the first 5 seconds realized that I couldn't read music and didn't really know how to play the drums, but I was very enthusiastic. So and then I was in a band shortly thereafter,
a cover band?
Heavy quote fingers. Well, yes. I mean, I was with my friend Trent Ehlert, who was a really good guitar player from a really young age. And so he wasn't in the school band, obviously.
And what kind of stuff was Trent playing?
So I remember Trent played in the talent show a year or two before I started playing drums. He played You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi. Mm-hmm. And I think my friend Jeff, if memory serves, who later played with us playing guitar, like sang. We're like little kids playing in the talent show. And so... So Trent and we formed, quote unquote, a band with me on my snare drum with the knowledge that I would get a drum set as soon as possible. And I remember even playing with him. He and I don't remember what we played, probably, Bon Jovi or Dokken or Def Leppard, things like that at first, in his basement. And so then at Christmas that year, Christmas in sixth grade, Christmas Eve, we celebrated at my dad's side of the family at my grandma's house, and I walk in and there's a drum set. And so that my dad got me this 1967 Ludwig Blue Oyster Pearl.
Beautiful.
Yes. From the paper, from an ad in the paper.
At that time, it was considered a used drum set, not a vintage drum set.
Yeah, it was a used drum set that wasn't cool because this is
Everybody was playing Tama.
Yeah, this is like 1988
Yamaha.
or something, right? And this is a late 60s drum set. And so he got it out of the paper, and if memory serves, he paid $220 for it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was it. I remember calling Trent on the phone. I was like, I got a drum set. We're good to go. So yeah, And
did you keep your drum set at your house then? Your mom's house?
I did.
So your dad got you the loudest possible instrument, and then you kept it at your mom's house?
And we lived in a duplex all growing up, and somehow I don't remember ever getting complaints except way later in high school, and the cops got called on us because the whole band was playing in the garage with the garage door open. But yeah, no, it was it was great. So yeah, I was and then at the talent show. So then the first musical performance I ever had was me and my buddy Trent and that guy Jeff, both of them playing guitar, no one singing, me playing a drum set. My dad gave me one quick lesson of like, here's how this goes, here's the mechanics of this, whatever. I don't remember him sitting down and playing a beat, but he explained it to me and did a couple things. But again, I just was like, I'm going to jump in. And the first thing I remember playing along to was that same Christmas I got a set of headphones that were like wireless transistor radio. And I remember trying to play along to Angel of Harlem, the U2 song. So I love that song to this day. And I remember just trying to play the ride cymbal and the snare in time. But then we did, for our music class, we did a performance, me and those two guys, of probably the most interesting version ever, or opposite of Armageddon It by Def Leppard. And I didn't even play the bass drum. I remember during the song, the music teacher pointing to the bass drum, and I remember like going, and I just was doing, I was playing eighth notes on the hi-hat with my foot, and then 2 and 4 on the snare, and then I was hitting with my right hand the floor tom.
For the bass drum.
Yeah, that's how I started.
When did you start becoming more comfortable and kind of really learning how to play?
I think pretty quickly. So I would just play along at home. I mean, I would play with my friends, and I don't remember when, but at some point it was actually my dad was like, no, that's the bass drum. That's what you're hearing. He explained it to me after, performing live in front of people a couple times without it.
Before I played a drum set, I always thought the bass drum was just like a showpiece so they could put the band's name.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the billboard.
Yeah.
So I remember starting to get comfortable and confident in like 8th grade at the drums. So that was kind of a pivotal time for me socially because, 7th or 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade is usually not the easiest time for any kid. Weird transition. And so, we had middle school where I grew up. So you go to grade school, kindergarten through 6th grade. You're in middle school, just 7th and 8th grade. Then you go to high school in 9th grade. So middle school was rough, in particular because you're growing and it's like boys played sports. And if you didn't play sports, at least I felt like I was like a dork. But the thing was, we started doing these band concerts that featured the drum set, which fortunately came naturally to me, and I was getting confident at doing it at that point. And we did Wipeout at a band concert in 8th grade. And I remember I played the solo and, whatever, could play it at that point. And so I got a lot of attention from being good at the drums. And so unfortunately, there was nobody else at my school that could play the drum set. So it kind of worked out that I was being recognized, like, oh, that guy does this. So it was kind of
it became your identity.
It really did. It full on became my identity for like a long time. Yeah.
Becoming your identity, or when did it cease to be your identity?
Well, I think that it just was this thing that I leaned to, that was kind of like this thing I had in my back pocket, like definitely into high school. Where it was kind of like, it wasn't exclusively my identity, but I was kind of felt like I had this secret weapon, this thing that, and I was just obsessed with it. So yeah, I don't know when it stopped because I pursued it so hard for so long, but yeah, I know that it did stop. It is part of my identity. I mean, as a 42-year-old man, I mean, it still is part of my identity, even though I don't do it every day anymore. So, but yeah. So I guess it didn't.
At some point in high school, did you decide that you wanted to become a professional drummer and dedicate your life to it?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I probably
Did it seem like something you could do at the time?
Yeah, it did. So I started high school in the fall of 1991. So, it's also the birth of grunge, So that wasn't exclusively the music I was listening to by any means in high school, but it killed hair metal, better like it or not, right? So all of a sudden it was like these guys that they're just normal guys, like getting record deals and stuff, like Led Zeppelin seemed like that was like my favorite band, but then you had Soundgarden. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I started playing professional shows on occasion where we get paid a little bit of money with my, original rock bands.
What was that band called, the first one?
So the first band that played at least some originals was just like several versions later of the band with me and my friend Trent. Same guy. And I think I was talking about this the other day, I think it was probably 1993, we played some parking lot of a park near where I grew up and near where I live now. That band was called Cactus Lotion.
Oh.
Yeah, how about that? That's some teen awesomeness. But the very, very, very first band, I should note, and I give my mom credit for this, the band that played in the music class and played in the talent show that year in 6th grade, Class Act. Class Act. Not bad, Mom. But so no, Cactus Lotion. But then that summer I won this like scholarship to go to this University of Kansas jazz camp. And so I went that summer and learned a ton. My first drum teacher that I studied with before I went into high school was like, you got to join jazz band in high school. And I was like, I was 14. I was like, I don't know jazz. I don't even know, or 15 or whatever. He's like, no, it's the only way you can play drum set at school. Trust me. And thank God he was right, And then I eventually fell in love with jazz. But so I met this dude at jazz camp that went to a different school nearby. And then that fall of my junior year of high school, he asked me to audition for his band. And that band, another terrible name, but this was an all original rock band with horns because we're all in school together, right? It wasn't like we all loved ska or something. There was some of that.
Although there was a lot of ska.
Although there was a lot of ska in the early mid 90s, yes. So, and that band was called Aristotle John. And Aristotle John, which I think they got, was like a name in the credits of some movie they saw, somebody that was like a gaffer. But that was cool because then it was like, okay.
Oh, you mean multiple Academy Award winning gaffer Aristotle John?
Right. Everybody knows him. IMDb. There might actually be an IMDb for Aristotle John. Anyway, but yeah, so that was the first original rock band. And we played clubs and stuff, and often we would show up and then they would be like, oh, you're children. You can't. You got to leave as soon as you're done playing. And okay, fortunately, the drummer's dad's here. My dad would usually be with us, and somebody else.
Because he had to drive the drum set.
He would either be driving the drum set, or he just wanted to come along. And hang, And so yeah, we'd have to sit with our parents before we played, and then leave. That happened all the time. And so yeah, I was playing. I was consumed at that point, and definitely was like, okay, well, we just got paid $100 that we'll split between the 7 of us because there's a 3-piece horn section.
Well, it's still enough to buy a CD or something back then, or a tape.
Exactly.
Or an LP especially.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money at all, but we made money.
Or pizza afterwards.
Exactly. Yes. Some McDonald's or something. Yeah.
Bigger than me. I no longer see the sun, you have eclipsed it. When you left, you reflected back the light. The glow of a million creatures with hope burning bright. I will wait for you 1,000 years, you wretched.
So what was your plan? What happened when you graduated high school?
I was graduating high school, so I had gone to that jazz camp a couple times, and even had to not go one summer because I'd put off this semester of biology that I failed, that I needed to graduate, so I had to make up. So, but I'd gone to that jazz camp a few times and kind of felt like I was being recruited a little bit because I showed some promise as a jazz drummer by KU and the professor there who I loved. So yeah, my plan was I was in a rock band. I just knew I wanted to make a living at music, and upon going to college, which I didn't do for very long, I was there for a year, I was at the first semester, my plan was, well, I'm going to go and study jazz for 4 years, and then I'll maybe move to New York and be a jazz drummer. But then at semester, so my friend that got me in the band Aristotle John, Mason Fan, who was a bass player, who was a really talented guy, he somehow there was this band that actually Aristotle John had opened up for once in a freak situation. We were going to play an open mic, and then they canceled the open mic, and then they're like, well, we canceled it because this band Stick, S-T-I-C-K, was doing a video shoot. Now I should go back to the grunge thing and say, the good thing about that, and also one of the bad things, is record industry went after like, oh, let's go for bands that are just no frills, cool rock and roll bands. So Lawrence, Kansas for 15 minutes in the mid-90s was the next Seattle, right? Just like Chapel Hill was the next Seattle, and blah, 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 blah. So,
well, the mid-90s had Lawrence and Kansas City had like Giant's Chair, Boys Life. Who else was around? The Get Up Kids. So
those were, so this was even a little earlier than that. So,
okay.
Those were very cool indie bands, and obviously the Get Up Kids, went on to do really, really great things and have a huge influence. But so there was this wave of bands in Lawrence in particular that got signed to major labels, and Kill Creek was one of them. Stick was one of them, got signed to Arista, and then there was this band that I would say arguably had the most commercial success called PAW, P-A-W.
I remember that name.
Yeah. Like they toured Europe and did cool things, and Tenderloin was one of those bands. Anyway, so yeah, Stick I signed to Arista, and when Lawrence was the next Seattle for 15 minutes. In the fall of my freshman year of college, Mason ends up auditioning for and joining Stick, which was crazy. We loved that band. And so, and then shortly thereafter, the drummer left. And then like right before Christmas, like 2 or 3 days before Christmas of 1995, I auditioned and got the gig, which at the time was like, the dream is coming true. You could maybe...
Clive Davis. You were with Arista.
Well, they had just been dropped.
Oh, okay.
So let's do the math here. We can see this coming, right? They had just been dropped. They did sign to a local indie label and had a new record that was going to come out. The bass and the rhythm section quits. Well, the ship was sinking.
Yeah.
Right? So, but what it did was it set the path for me professionally as far as my music career for a long time. Because that band only really lasted about a year. The singer moved to Chicago. We still played shows. And actually, our last show that we played, almost exactly a year from me joining the band, which it felt like longer than that at the time, but was a showcase for Atlantic, for Lava Records, for Jason Flom, record mogul, and this guy Andy Karp. It was like 2 days before Christmas we played. And then we didn't feel the show went very well. And then it was Christmas. We didn't hear from him for like a month. Meanwhile, I had met the guitar player's roommate who had this band and blah, 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 blah. But he and I called him the day after the show, and I was like, I think we just played our last show. How about you and I start a band? And we did. And then that band was called The Creature Comforts, and that was actually my first band that did real tours, And that's when I met a lot of our, mutual friends from the past, Jake Cardwell and stuff like that, and came and played basements in Madison and places like that, right? So, yeah.
Which basement did you play in Madison?
Gosh.
Was it called the Slant House?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Right. Yeah.
I saw a lot of bands there.
Yeah.
Well, so I met you through a charity event that you throw every year called Thunder Gong.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how did the charity Steps of Faith begin?
Yeah. Well, so Steps of Faith began in short. In 2005, my life changed in pretty much every way because I was diagnosed with a type of cancer called Ewing's sarcoma, and it was in my left ankle. And
so you were 28 at the time,
exactly,
or something?
Yeah. And so...
and who were you playing with at the time?
That was Blackpool Lights. So that was a band that I started with Jim Suptic from the Get Up Kids, and that was his first solo, project away from those guys. Yeah, brand new band. The songs were killer because Jim is an amazing songwriter to this day. That guy's just like a melody machine. And it had a ton of promise. I'd been in a band actually that was based out in LA for a year and had just left that band. That band was called The Start, but I just was unhappy for a lot of reasons at that time. I love them to this day and we're friends now. But it was like I was doing all the things I'd always wanted to do. And I was miserable. Like The Start got signed to Nitro Records, and which was owned by Dexter Holland of The Offspring. And so, we were out here all the time because they lived out here, and we made a record at Sunset Sound, and toured with The Offspring in the UK and America. And anyway, but I left that band, bad timing on their part, right before the record came out that I made with them. And then Jim and I started Blackpool Lights, and then So that was like summer of 03, summer of 04, and then fall of 04, Jim and I started the band, and then at the beginning of 05, Blackpool Lights played our first show in Kansas City, and it was great. And then a week later, I'd been going through all these tests to figure out why my ankle had been hurting all for these years, and then that's when I was diagnosed with cancer. So
your ankle had been hurting for years?
Yeah. So that is because I was in a car accident in 1999. So at that point, 2005 had been 6 years. It was crazy death cheating experience. Snowy highway thing. Jaws of life were used to get me out of the truck. It was crazy. Compression fracture on a couple of vertebrae in my back. It was nuts. That was in the winter, obviously snow. That summer, my ankle started hurting in the middle of the night for 3 nights, kept me up for 3 nights. Terrible pain, went away. Over time, this started happening more and more. Got it looked at by the doctor who cared for me after I injured my back. Didn't see anything, didn't know what was going on. It basically, over time, it would hurt more, last longer, and be a higher level of pain. And so Blackpool Lights is getting going. At the beginning of 2005, I went to a neurologist because we just assumed, well, I jacked up my back. I've got some nerve damage from that's affecting my leg. And so went to a neurologist. Test. This is not a neurological issue. Lots of tests follow, ultimately lead to determine that I have cancer and then this certain type of cancer. And get right into chemo. And then in August 4th, 2005, my doctors had told me all the things before they knew it was cancer. Here's all the things that this could be, and here's what will happen if it's this. If it's this, we'll do this, this, with this. And the last thing he says was, if it is a sarcoma, we have to remove the sarcoma and everything that it touches. And the only reason you would lose your leg would be to save your life. I was like, okay, fair enough. So I now know, looking back, that I kind of felt like it was the one thing.
Did you have insurance at the time, by the way?
Yeah, fortunately I did. My mom, I still have the same insurance policy. I now pay for it, but my mom got that from me when I was in high school, for like $20 a month or something at the time. A little more than that now. Fortunately I had health insurance, but there was still insane bills and fundraisers for me that were necessary. So lost the leg August 4th, 2005, and then that's kind of when everything changed. So
when you say everything changed, how did your outlook change? You mentioned earlier that before then you were doing all the things you ever wanted to do, but you weren't happy. Mm-hmm. So how did your outlook change?
So in a lot of ways, I realized that something like that, I still am a really impatient person. So something like that really taught me patience. And the first thing I remember feeling was like, I am not in control of this. I don't want this to happen. No one wants this to happen. I'm not in control. We're fragile people. So I definitely had a massive, a kind of coinciding with that, a crazy spiritual transformation that happened for me. But also it just was like, okay, I have to just go along with this, and trust that I'm going to come out of this better. I've kind of always had what do we got to do to get through this mentality. And so it just, like the mantra word, if you will, was just like forward,
What was the spiritual realization you had during this time?
That I was not in control, and God was, And I kind of had this, I grew up with, because of my parents being divorced and kind of being, neither one of them kind of consistently going to church every Sunday. I won't say like I grew up in the church like some people would say, but I did grow up with like the knowledge of like the basics of like Catholicism, but also of like Christianity. Like I knew the basics, and I did believe that. And I would pray and those kind of things. But, I didn't go to church at that point in my life, and I just kind of had these, I don't know what I thought. But, yeah, so I kind of just surrendered, really, was just, and it wasn't a situation of like, oh, God, save my life and I will follow you, which I think a lot of people have those moments, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's kind of the classic.
That's a classic.
That's a classic. It's a classic, situation of people being in times of terrible trauma and turmoil, I guess. But
the old foxhole.
Yes, right. There you go. Everybody knows that one. So yeah, no, it was a big transformation for the better, and so my outlook really in every way started to change. My friends didn't change. You know what I mean? I just felt like, dude, I was like, I'd lost all my hair. I had my friggin' leg amputated. It was kind of like a snake shedding its skin in a lot of ways, outside and inside. So I had this thought where I just was like, okay, I don't know what's happening, but I'm scared as hell, but I just got to trust this and trust these doctors and just like trust God and just be like, I hope I come out better on the other side. And I'm happy to say I did, also in every way.
Do you still feel like you have a tendency to want to control things these days?
Absolutely.
So do you think that you've gotten better at kind of deciding what you want to control and what you want to let go of?
I do feel that I've gotten better at that, and I feel like it's a thing that I constantly have to keep an eye on, like really my anxiety these days. So after I got healthy and everything, I would have anxiety about my health, understandably. I don't really
like
have
anytime there was a little something you were worried that it was cancer.
Absolutely.
What was the prognosis when they decided to amputate? Were they reasonably sure that would take care of it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They told me when I got back, you do the surgery, they take you into a recovery room, and then eventually you come out of there and you go back to your room where you're staying. That's what happened with me. And I remember being back in that room, and I was out of it, but I remember somebody saying, through tears, like, might even been a nurse or my mom or somebody, it's great news. They got the leg, but they feel they got all the cancer. So, and I remember my first thought was, that's great. I sure as hell hope they did, But I now know from other stories of people that have had a similar cancer, that's not always the case. Fortunately, mine hadn't spread beyond my leg. It hadn't spread to my lungs or any of that. So yeah, it was good right away. I did have to go back into chemo. For another several months just to make sure.
It's an insurance policy.
That's exactly what it was. But yeah, no, that was a crazy time in the hospital. It was like the worst time of my life has actually made this really complex, kind of beautiful memory because it's like everybody I ever knew showed up.
Yeah, Jason Gherkin, who was on this show, told me an interesting story about coming in the night before they cut off your leg.
Yeah.
Can you remember what was going on?
He brought me a T-shirt that was the pirate flag. So that's what he brought me, which I remember really well. And he was living here at the time in LA and was obviously from Kansas City and like came in for that to be with me. So like I love Gherkin and I'll never forget that. That happened. Several people just like came and just like sat with me in my room. It was like last call every night at 11 o'clock or whatever. They had to like kick people out of the room, because it was just like I just was surrounded by all these people. It was incredible. But right after somebody whispered in my ear they got all the cancer, that's when I received one of two phone calls from Rick Allen. Did I ever tell you this story?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think you did.
Yeah. So
Rick Allen, for those of you who don't know, the great drummer of Def Leppard who also lost an arm.
Yeah.
Lost a limb.
So, again, my first musical performance ever was playing a Def Leppard song, right? And so that guy was a huge influence on me at the time I started playing music. So I always have, I always think about those, Def Leppard, Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, these bands that were like, all of a sudden I could relate because I'm a drummer all of a sudden. And so these were the things that we were listening to. So Def Leppard was playing, but night before my surgery, Def Leppard was playing a show in Kansas City. Our friend Greg Tott, who was with me in the hospital every day, he's on this really popular morning radio show on this 98.9 The rock and roll station in Kansas City. It's been around forever. They were sponsoring the show. He was trying to make arrangements for Rick to come, and it fell through, and so he was mega bummed and told me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so sweet of you. That would have been nuts, right? Well, then the next morning he calls me. And so we talked on the phone for a few minutes, and I was like so out of it, but I remember it. We only talked for like a minute, and he was like, all right, mate, how about I call you tomorrow when you're not so sedated? And he did. Sure enough, I was like, he's not going to call again. The next day, I'm telling the nurse the story, and then he calls. Hello, Billy, it's Rick. And it was great. And it was like, we only talked for a few minutes. I wanted to talk about Def Leppard and whatever. I just was so crazy that this terrible time in my life, this really bright moment was happening. He was talking to me about, I realize this now, and I remember I took notes. He was talking to me about what I now know to be cancer-fighting foods. Really healthy eating. You gotta eat.
Gotta eat your kale, mate.
Yeah, no, you gotta eat lots of spinach, man. The juice, whole effing bags of spinach. Yeah, totally. And so, but it was a really inspiring situation. We've got some mutual friends that when we've kind of communicated through mutual friends. Bill Cardwell is one of them. Cactus Mosier is one of them. But I want to talk to him because it was just such a great moment in the darkest moments of my life. So anyway, Rick Allen, there's the Rick Allen story.
We got to get him on this show, and then
be incredible.
We can bring you out to do like a special guest segment interview.
Oh, that would be like a dream, dude. Yeah.
I wonder where he lives now.
I think he's here.
Oh, he is?
I think he might be here. I had Steps of Faith had this intern for a semester, and her boyfriend at the time was Rick's nephew. Rick's brother lives in Nashville and is like a music industry dude. And this kid was trying to connect us, but it didn't happen. So I just need to push harder and just be like, more than once, Bill Cardwell's like, I gave Rick Allen your phone number. And I was like, give me his.
Why does Cardwell know Rick Allen? Does Rick play CNC drums? He doesn't play CNC drums.
I think they're
just buddies?
I think they became buds. I think they met because Bill is friends with Todd Sucherman.
Oh, yeah.
They're tight. And I think Def Leppard and Styx were touring together. I guess
that makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess to answer your question, so many years later after losing my leg, so I was finished chemo December of 2005, Blackpool Lights, stuck to the original plan, which I feel really good about, in that I was on tour with the band March of 2006.
And how did you play? How did it feel? How did you recover?
Yeah. So I had been sitting around sick for a year thinking about how this would work if I lost my leg. And then after I lost my leg, for 6 months after that or whatever, the day I got my prosthetic leg, I went with my stepdad and his dad to Blackpool Lights practice space. At the time in Kansas City, a bunch of bands were practicing in a storage facility, which was a cool thing for a while. We wrote our record there, and the band formed there. It was great. So we went to the storage facility, and I couldn't really walk. Lost my leg above the knee. It's harder to learn how to walk when you don't have your knee with a prosthetic leg. And so, but I went in with those guys and played, and they came with me because one of the things I'd thought about ahead of time was I was worried with my leg being amputated again, right above the knee, 3 inches above the knee, that when I would play, it hadn't happened yet. I was worried that when I would play, I would be playing and my foot would come off the hi-hat pedal and I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to use my hands, which would take away from my playing, to put my foot back on the pedal. So my stepdad's dad, who passed away last year, he was a really brilliant guy. He basically built this metal box on top of my hi-hat pedal like a stirrup that kept my...
Yeah, or a ski boot.
Exactly. Yeah, and it kept my foot in. And so that was a big thing. So I didn't have to think about that, which was great. And it just was a physical change. I realized that I moved around. I had a drum teacher who's a great friend to this day, who plays with us at Thundergong, Matt Ronan, the percussionist, I remember taking a drum set lesson with him in high school, and he was like, you have a lot of extraneous body movement when you play. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I just wanted to point that out. So I had to move less, because if your whole body is moving and you go from these few little muscles, like even just in your foot or your ankle, to kind of keep the hi-hat at a consistent level of openness, then you've got to basically, all of that movement is controlled by your hip all of a sudden.
Hip flexor, yeah.
I move less. I sit up straighter. I adjusted the kit differently. So just like little things I figured out, And actually, the story about the ski boot stirrup situation. So Blackpool Lights, on the year anniversary of me getting the news I was going to lose my leg, which was July 21st. So July 21st, 2005 is when I got the news. 2 weeks later, it happened. A year later, which we realized when we got there and we were toasting each other, Blackpool Lights went to Japan, play some shows, which was an incredible dream come true. We played this festival, and it was all these crazy bands, like Kiss, Ben Folds, like all over the map. The lineup was so weird. And we were on Warped Tour in Japan, was just a stage at this festival. It was the Udo Fest, and we were on the Wapudo stage, the exclamation point.
Yeah. And
that was Social Distortion, the Vandals, Pennywise.
Was Josh playing with the Vandals when you saw him?
No, Derek from Alkaline Trio was filling in. Yeah, and us, and a couple Japanese bands. So, big festival thing. They're moving a bunch of stuff on and off. I didn't fly drums to Japan. And it was one of those things where the drums are set up on the riser. I set them up backstage, and then when it's time for us to start, they just roll out the riser and all the gear, right? So thinking ahead about not having my hi-hat and thinking, I'm going to need that. And Blackpool Lights was this high-energy power pop rock and roll band. I'm not, kind of up-tempo stuff. I don't have time to... Again, I didn't have to worry about the leg. So what I had our manager...
Duct tape your foot.
Duct tape my foot to the pedal. So we roll out, we play the show, they roll me on the riser off.
Yeah.
Alex, our manager, cuts the tape off my foot because I couldn't reach it.
Right.
The next day, so we played the festival 2 days in a row. That stage played the same place 2 days in a row. We're setting up. First of all, I show up and it was like I had a tech that had been with me for months, because I show up and everything's ready. All the heights are right. And I was like, who? I didn't talk to anybody about this. Nothing was spiked. Like, how do they know this? So I sit down, everything's ready to go, and I'm looking for Alex. They were getting ready to wheel me out, and I can't find Alex to tape my foot to the pedal. And then this Japanese stagehand comes up to me all wide-eyed, runs up right before we go out. He holds up a roll of duct tape, and he goes, "Me tape?" And I was like, yes. He tapes my foot to the pedal. He saw it. I was wearing shorts, so it's like they saw the leg, but I just thought that was what attention to detail. And I have a picture of him cutting the tape off after the show. So yeah.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you by Yamaha Drums.
We can face ourselves in the mirror. We can look real hard at all those things that are not nice. To the left, move to the right, confidence in your feet feel right. Carry that weight, hold your head up high. 'Cause you move to the left, move to the right, in the middle of the day, in the middle.
What was the impetus to start Steps of Faith?
Yeah, okay. So I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. We moved to Nashville, Tennessee, July 4th, 2009.
Who's we?
Dates. Me and my wife. And so I left Blackpool Lights. I was doing a lot of freelance work in Kansas City, which was great. But a lot of the work I was wanting to do, I really wanted to make my bread and butter 9 to 5 in the studio. And so that wasn't really an option in Kansas City. It was in Nashville, so we moved there. And I did some studio work. It was toured mostly with some artists there. But then in the beginning of 2013 was a crazy time. I'd had a really great year, 2012, doing a lot of touring, mostly working with this brilliant artist, Katie Herzig, out of Nashville, and doing a ton of touring with her. It was really, really great. It opened a lot of doors for me. A friend of mine had written a musical. I spent 6 weeks in New York playing in this musical and acting in this musical about a family band. It was all this great stuff was happening. And my wife got pregnant in that time, which was a miracle that we didn't know if that was going to be able to happen. So that was really beautiful. Beginning of 2013, our baby comes 6 weeks early, which he was healthy, thank God, but it was a huge surprise. So I was looking, and then I'm like, the phone wasn't ringing anyway for me at that point in time after a busy year. So I was like, I got to find a new job. Man, I was at my prosthetic clinic. I had an appointment getting some work done on my leg. And my prosthetist said to me one day, he was like, okay, before you leave on your way out, I got this new patient who just lost his leg to cancer. I'm fitting him with a leg today. Will you go in and talk to him for a minute, being on the other side of this like you are? I was like, dude, I would love that. I feel like that's part of why this happened to me, and I don't get to have that many conversations like that. He's like, okay, great, get in there. Talk to the guy for 5 minutes. He's all wide-eyed and hopeful. And I felt so good after that. I told my wife that I wished that could be my job. And I had another appointment the next day, and I told my prosthetist the same thing. And he's like, well, maybe it could be. And I was like, yeah, how do you get paid to be nice to people? And so long story short, he introduced me to his boss, which was a gentleman that owned the prosthetic clinic where I was a patient. That guy's name is Rob Pittman in Nashville. And Rob and I started having a couple conversations about maybe working together. And I was like, where's this going to go? Okay. And in the second conversation, we were having to sit down, and he said to me, we were just kind of brainstorming, just kind of getting to know each other and stuff. And I said, man, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I don't really know. I love the idea of helping you somehow. I was like, I'm a musician. Working for a specialty healthcare clinic, even if it's specializes in something that I need, prosthetics, doesn't really, that's not attractive to me. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, but the idea of helping to be the bridge to like hope and comfort to people that are on the front end of this terrible thing happening to them, I can't think of anything that moves me more. And he was like, okay, I got it. I established a 501c3 4 years ago, a nonprofit.
Oh, he had.
Yeah. He had this idea, and because patients would come into his clinic that wouldn't have health insurance or wouldn't have proper coverage, and he didn't want to turn them away. So he started a nonprofit to help those folks. But he had a really successful string of regional orthotics and prosthetic shops. So he didn't have time. Turns out a nonprofit is actually a business. It's just a different tax denomination, and it takes a ton of work, and you got to really care about it and hopefully get lucky or know what you're doing. And so he didn't have time to get off the ground. He was like, what if you come on as the executive director and you do this? And that's how it started. So Rob Pittman is the founder, and I joke that he tossed me the keys to a car with no engine in it and said, let's see if we can get that going. And that's really how it got started. The first thing I did was I went to everybody I know and said, check out what just happened to me. Because it's based on the people that knew me and loved me. It's a crazy part of the story. Now I get to do this. Well, what that did was it started the initial donor base that sustained us for years. So that's really how Steps of Faith got started. So really, Rob changed my life.
And just to be clear, what is the mandate of Steps of Faith?
So Steps of Faith Foundation is a nonprofit that helps uninsured amputees or severely underinsured amputees get prosthetic limbs. So you've lost a limb, and sometimes that's everybody. That knows no tax bracket. Yes, there have been people that were homeless that we've helped. There have been people that became homeless because of this. That we've helped and brought out of homelessness. That also includes people that we've helped, like a gentleman we highlighted at Thundergong this last year who had a great job, but he lost his leg to a motorcycle accident and had, after a year of surgery, trying to save his leg, his company did everything they were supposed to do, and they had to drop him from the insurance. And what is he doing? This guy was like suicidal. And so Steps of Faith helps those people. Steps of Faith ends the catch-22 and restores people's mobility by giving them prosthetic limbs when they need them nationwide.
If you think about your mental state now versus 25-year-old you who is living the dream but not feeling it, like, where are you now?
Yeah.
Are you happier now?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I have, I've always had kind of a positive, hopeful disposition.
I noticed that. But I didn't know you long ago, so...
Yeah. So I've always kind of been that way.
Yeah.
You know, I think my general vibe is the same, you know. But, you know, I have a lot more layers of beauty and responsibility in my life and purpose, you know. And I'm a lot less selfish, I hope. I know I am. I still got a long way to go, right? We're all on the spectrum of selfishness. But yeah, you know.
Yeah, we are. And I think that even altruistic acts like helping somebody, you know, get an artificial limb, it's selfish to a certain extent, but it's channeling the selfishness to the benefit of others.
Well, that's what
right?
we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
if
selfishness is a self-preservation and an evolutionary trait that was bred into us by, you know, thousands of years of evolution.
Right.
But if we choose to filter it towards something positive, then it's even better. It's a better use of that trait.
Absolutely. I just feel so lucky that I met Rob and that he, you know, asked me to do this. And then from there, you know, like I said, here, see what you can do with that. You know, 6 years and 250 people later, you know, we're helping a lot of folks and we're doing it nationwide, and that it's growing by the month. There's a lot of, I say there's a lot of depth to my life. I mean, like the depth of joy and beauty. In that, you know, I feel incredibly lucky that I made it through all that junk, and that I met Rob, and then I have this job, and then I met my wife. I met my wife a month after I lost my leg, going through chemo, no leg, 30 more or so pounds lighter than this, no hair, gray skin, one leg, you know, and she fell in love with me like that, which is, I mean, she was easy to fall in love with. She's beautiful, still is, you know, and so, you know, it's just, I feel very, very lucky in that we were able to have kids, which it didn't look like that was going to happen. So yeah, I just am like really grateful, really lucky, and am super psyched. So Thunder Gong, you know, as we mentioned, Jason Sudeikis,
Who you went to high school with?
Well, we met
You were
when I
friends
was
in
in
high
high
school.
school.
Yeah.
So he's a year older than me and went to a different school. I was 18, he was 19, and we met because we both were coming into this improv comedy troupe called Comedy Sports in Kansas City at the time in 1995. And so we were trained together, and so we just became fast friends, similar interests, that kind of thing. And you know, I spent like every day with him for 2 years doing these comedy shows, and that's kind of how we first became friends. And we've been in each other's lives ever since, and he's been one of my best friends, and I love him like a brother. And so, you know, look, man, 2006, I needed this prosthetic leg, this like the quote unquote permanent leg, because I had this temporary hydraulic thing. Blackpool Lights was on that tour in March of 06, and I learned how to walk, being in a new city on a new stage with, you know, every day. But I needed this prosthetic leg that would be the better suited for me long term. And my insurance would only cover half of it. I needed to raise $30,000.
So this leg cost $60,000.
That's right.
And is that about what they cost today?
This leg still costs about that amount. Yeah, I mean, this is 3 versions
And
later.
so that's so far beyond what an average person can afford, you know, as
Yeah.
a surprise.
Yeah, oh,
And
exactly.
First of all, they've gone through whatever they've gone through to lose the leg, and then often insurance doesn't cover the whole thing.
Right. And that was the situation with me. So it was a thing where I happened to be, the day I got that news, meeting with a great friend of mine who's actually the guy that trained Jason and I at Comedy Sports, who I'm having dinner with tonight, Corey Rittmaster, who lives here in LA now. And dude, he and his wife Monique organized this fundraiser for me in Kansas City. 2 shows at the Old Record Bar. Corey and Monique, Jason Sudeikis, his wife at the time, Kay Cannon, who was one of our biggest supporters and ambassadors and is on our board of directors for Steps of Faith now, and our great friend Ed Goodman, who's hilarious, who all these folks live out here. They organized this fundraiser, which was a improv comedy show that they did, and then Blackpool Lights played. And then one of the shows, that second band played, The Architects, who are great friends of mine to this day. And we raised $40,000. Fast forward, I get the Steps of Faith gig. changes my life. Shortly thereafter, I tell Jason, I was like, look, man, telling him about it. I was in New York. I was still playing shows occasionally at that point, like little tours, while being a new dad and trying to figure Steps of Faith out. And I was in New York, and I told him, I'd been texting him about it. I was like explaining how it worked to him. I was like, so we raised over $30,000 for me a few years ago. If we raised $30,000 for Steps of Faith, that's like potentially helping like over 30 people. And he was like, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah.
What do you mean it's potentially helping over 30 people?
So how Steps of Faith works from the nuts and bolts of it. So what we do is we get prosthetic legs and arms for people, right? So how it works is we work with prosthetists. Those are the doctors around the country. They donate their time and labor. We pay for the parts, and we pay for the parts that make up the prosthetic legs and arms at wholesale. So we cost. So we have our own account with a large distributor. You know, the manufacturer makes it, they sell it to the distributor, right? So we pay cost for the parts. So we're not always, because we're small, we're not getting the $60,000 legs for people. We're getting them something that's going to get them hopefully back to work and then back to better funding with an insurance situation. Then they can get that, right? And we've seen that happen. Well, I have examples of that exact path happening. So for as low as sometimes $500 to $1,000, we can get somebody back on their feet, back walking, back to work, back to whatever they were doing. So that's what I mean by over 30 people. So he was like, that's amazing. So I remember I said, when the time is right for you, let's do an event, and it can be whatever we want. We make the rules. The time was right for us anytime he wanted it to be, because we were a new nonprofit that needed money, you know, and he has vast resources and special friends all over the world. And so it took a while, but eventually my wife and I moved back to Kansas City in 2016. That's one of the best decisions we've ever made, personally and professionally, from Nashville. Then in the fall of 2017, had this idea for a long time, and we'd been talking about it all year, Jason and I. And we created Thundergong, which is a crazy benefit concert, insane kind of a variety show in some ways. And it's unique in that it's all music, and we have incredible musicians that have joined us, like from Chance the Rapper to Ben Harper to Wynonna Judd to Mr. Joe Wong.
I got to play with Wynonna Judd and Ben Harper. That was fun.
Absolutely. And so, but it's also unique in that there are people who, are these fun, famous folks that aren't famous for being musicians, like Jason, Jason's the MC, but he's also singing and playing music. And eventually we're going to get
Forte, Fred Armisen.
Exactly. Sam Richardson. Mm-hmm. And so...
Rob
Zabrecki, absolutely. So it's been... Thundergong is like a dream come true for me. I think you can see this,
Absolutely. It's so much fun to be a part of, too.
Yeah, I love that. And so really it's, if you think back about what we've been talking about, it brings all of those things together. I put a lot of stock and responsibility and friendship. Like, I've realized that, like, my job in Steps of Faith is just what I did when I got the job. Call everybody I know and talk to them, And
you're a good talker.
I can talk, right? And so yeah, it's just, Thundergong is great because it involves friends old and new coming together to make music and raise a lot of money for Steps of Faith. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm just so thankful for it.
Billy Brimblecom, thank you so much for being on the show.
Joe, this is no joke my favorite podcast in the world, and I love you, and this is like a deep honor to be a guest on the show. I mean it.
I'm honored to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.